Welcome to Sleepless Whispers and where fear meets insomnia. These are true horror stories, told for the sleepless souls who can't close their eyes. Every word you're about to hear, I swear to God, it's true. Tonight's story. I started seeing faces in the streetlights. I used to think the highway at night was just an absence between towns. Now I know it's a place that keeps a record. My name's Dana Reyes. I run the night shift at the Cedar Pines towing lot, small operation, 3 trucks, 1 folding office, neon sign that hums like a restless insect. The highway curves there, a ribbon of black and salt, and after midnight the only company is the wind through chain link and the distant thrum of 18-wheelers. People call me because their cars die in the dark. I show up, I tow, I drink burnt thermos coffee. That's the rhythm that kept me human. The first time I heard it, the headlights were filing names into the tar the way a rain writes lines. A Subaru at the edge of the lot flashed twice, then once, then twice, like a slow Morse somebody had learned with their thumbs. I was folding a tarp and I watched because I didn't believe pattern had agency. The light spelled a single name, Rita. It was not a prank. The car was empty. The blinking was deliberate and gentle, like someone trying to be polite. We left a sticky note on the dash. Rita? And the next morning the note was gone. In its place on the seat was a folded paper with a neat sentence. She likes jade beads. The handwriting wasn't mine. It smelled faintly of cigarette smoke and lemon. The lot practices small rituals. After a week of odd lights, I started keeping a notebook. Names, times, weather, sequences. Saying a name aloud felt like gathering an offering. At first, these were small recoveries. A woman found a lost locket slipped under a seat. A kid got his headphones back from between the cushions of an abandoned minivan. Each return felt like pressing a seam closed. The lot wanted practice, and we gave it words. Saying a name into the wind seemed to teach the taillights a new language. Then Theo didn't come back. Theo was a kid who worked mornings and liked caffeine. He'd sat with me sometimes when the night ran long and told grim jokes. One rain night he said he'd walk a buddy home along the highway and then text. He didn't. His truck stayed in the lot all week. I found his phone beneath a seat 2 days later. The last photo was of a stretch of road with hazard lights on, the image crooked as a person who'd been sliding sideways. The timestamp read 3:17 a.m. After Theo, the patterns got meaner. The lights spelled longer things and paused between letters like someone rethinking. Trucks started parking just off the lot at peculiar angles, their turn signals tapping like metronomes. Sometimes the blinking spelled not a name but a sentence. We are counting. It wasn't playful then. Counting requires agreement. We tried rules. Don't take the bait. Don't stand alone. Record everything. The county deputy laughed and called it a wiring quirk. Signals don't do nouns, he said, but he never visited the edge of the lot at the hour when the highway learns breath. You can't explain certain things in daylight. One night a woman walked into the office trembling, clutching a Polaroid. Her hand smelled like onion and rain. My sister went missing 5 years ago, she said. Her name was Rita. She slid the picture across the desk. Rita in the photo wore a cheap holiday sweater and a crooked smile. She'd been at a bar that closed on a Tuesday and then wasn't. The family had exhausted police leads into polite silence. She'd come because of a note she'd found taped inside a second-hand jacket. She likes jade beads. We started to pay attention differently. The lot's light patterns weren't random. They were addressive. When we spoke Rita's name into the lot, the Subaru blinked slower, as if considering the sound. Saying details mattered. We learned to voice small facts. Rita likes jade beads, smokes menthols. The car paused like a listener. Then one morning, volunteers found a scrap of jade tumbled from under a verge near mile marker 42. Recovery begets ritual. People showed up at night with scrapbooks, with questions, with soft desperation. They sat in the folding chairs and read names into cheap recorders, 3 times with a fact like a litany. The lot responded by slowing its lights, by arranging the tail end of the highway like ribbons for someone to find. Some nights it felt humane, like some machine had learned to return the missing. But the lot's hunger deepened. Saying a name had edges. If you spoke a name and didn't follow with a detail, time, color, last seen, the lot seemed to itch. Blink sequences grew frantic. Horns honked in answering staccato. Once, a driver called from down the road to report his cab had been blinking his name in the lot. When he arrived, 3 cars had their hoods up and flashes flashing dead run like a chorus. Nobody in them. Someone had left folded slips on the seats with single words. Wait, remember, Don. Then one August, a man rolled in with an old pickup and a dog business card in the visor. He paid cash for a light tune and asked to borrow my charge cable. I said no thanks and went to the office. When I came back, the dog-eared card was gone. In its place, the pickup's rear blinker had spelled a time and a set of initials. Later, the man would say he'd been certain he'd never left the lot. His truck's hood had been dented the size of a closed fist. He left in the morning like someone paid to forget. There was a night the deputy came back with a portable scanner and a grin meant to end superstition. Let's see these ghosts, he said, cheerful and small. The highway that night seemed to take offense. The deputy parked too close to the curb. His scanner picked up a frequency that sounded like a throat clearing in chorus. The lot began to blink in a pattern neither of us recognized. Long, long, 2 pause long. We wrote it down. Later, someone translated. It matched no Morse in manuals but read like a slow apology. What the lot wanted was practice. When we complied, the lights could be kind. When we refused, the world tightened. One afternoon, a tow returned a driver's jacket to a porch. The family claimed it wailing. We thought he'd left it on the way out. No one had called the lot about the jacket. The jacket smelled like someone who had sat awake for long hours. At its worst, the lot made you complicit. A woman who'd read names aloud without care came back to the folding chairs the next week, with her hair wet and eyes hollow. I did it wrong, she said. I said the wrong middle name. She'd left the lot muttering and then tumbled into the ditch. The coroner's report said hypothermia. We learned quickly to be precise. Names are exacting things. Change a syllable and you address a different absence. Months stretched. The notebook grew like a ledger. I kept a copy in my glove box, ink smudged, edges soft from my thumb. People sent me messages, emails at odd hours, photos of taillight spelling fragments, audio files of clicks. Some nights we talked like a bunker. How to say a name slow, whether to add scent, whether to record. We refined our rituals. They were the only tools that worked. One winter storm, the highway iced. A sedan slid and crumpled across the guardrail. 2 people died there that night and the world declared cold facts. I was the first on scene. The cars were a half shape under snow. The lot's lights flashed in a pattern I hadn't seen. A full sentence running across 6 parked cars. When I transcribed it later, it read like an apology. We lost them all. It felt like a hand passed across a ledger. After that, the lot changed. It was quieter, less hungry. Maybe it had finished teaching us how to answer. Maybe the count had reached something. People still came with photos. People still left notes under dashboards. But the pattern softened. The blinking eased back into simple names, polite and brief. Sometimes when the wind was right, you could catch a slow sequence of taillights answering to a name being read into a small recorder, and feel that the world had shifted, if only background. I keep the notebook. I keep the ritual. Before I go out on any call, I whisper the names I've collected into the cab and add a detail. The last song, the jacket color, a small fact. The highway still learns. I don't pretend otherwise, but now I try to teach it something kinder, that names are not just for counting. They're for bringing things home. If you ever see headlights blinking a name from the shoulder of a highway, sit a while, say it aloud, add a detail. Be exact, be careful. The count will listen, the count will practice, and sometimes if you do it right, the world gives something back. If you're still awake, listen closely, though another true horror begins. Stroy name, lost names, Under Union Station, he grew up learning the city's vocabulary: turnstile, underpass, red line, last call. We learn places by the names we don't say out loud, the ones that might make trains slow if they hear you. My name's Rowan, and I run the municipal lost and found beneath Union Station, where umbrellas go missing and headphones settle into nests. Most days are filing and polite boredom. Evenings are inventory and the soft clatter of metal bins. We stamp tags, date, description, claimed, and watch the world hand over pieces of itself. Names help return things. If a hat has a name written in the sweatband, you've got a better shot at getting it back. Unnamed items gather dust and patience. One night, an old mechanic dropped a scuffed black cap by the counter. "Found it on car 7, he said. He smelled like oil. I wrote the tag and set the cap aside. When the room was quiet, the cap made a small noise, less a word than the cadence of one. It sounded like someone practicing a syllable. I told myself I was tired. Next day, a kid claimed the cap and grinned. He warned me in the way kids do. "Don't let it learn your name." I laughed, but the phrase didn't leave my head. Then the ledger changed. Our logbook is practical. Rows for items, boxes, claimed stamps. One night someone scribbled a name in the margin. Later, another clerk added a time beside it. The margins filled with tiny entries, snatches of names and notations like Scene 205, Car 4. It started small, a clerical habit turned odd. The building listened. The vents would cough out fragments, "Remember, don't forget." Sometimes an equipment hum would imitate the cadence of a name. Nobody wanted to say it loud, not at first. Saying the thing aloud felt like feeding it. We installed a camera over the sorting table to see whether fatigue was making us hallucinate. In footage, frames would skip, a man walking mid-stride, then a grainy pause the length of a held breath. Audio had a smear, like a consonant dissolved in white noise. Maintenance shrugged. The city blamed wiring. Then items began to return themselves. A scarf appeared folded at the ledger with a post-it. "She likes the river." A badge repositioned its pins into a neat arrow. A Polaroid of a woman smiling was left on our desk, and someone had written on the back, "Don't leave it ringing." People started to bring offerings: chocolate, post-its with names, small attempts at kindness. We tried rules: no marginalia. Tape boxes closed. For a while, nothing. Then a coat we boxed slid across the floor to the ledger table. It folded itself with a neatness that felt like deliberate hands. The ledger, sitting open, had a new inscription in a hand none of us recognized. Rowan H. That night my phone received a message with a single word: "Remember." I refused to write names for a week. People noticed. The office misfiled itself like a disappointed brain. Earbuds in a coffee can, a badge tucked inside a sandwich bag. The vents grew more insistent, imitating voices of colleagues in the stairwell. "Rowan?" They'd intone. I'd answer and the air would cough. Amir, a young clerk, doodled a name on a slip and carried it home. He didn't come back. His bag was found by platform 2, open, wallet, where he'd left an unfinished coffee. On the ledger page where he'd scribbled, someone had written in tiny letters, "Evelyn." He'd been researching a name he'd seen on a ticket. The footage showed him walking toward the tracks. The frame stalled where a pause should be. His mother called and mentioned he'd complained of whispers in the vents. After Amir, the ledger became sacred and feared. Clerks began to read entries, aloud as they logged them, a chorus instead of a single mouth. We added little notes: blue scarf, polite laugh, sits window side. Saying the names out loud seemed to steady things. The vents quieted a bit when more than one voice spoke. We tried. To burn a page, the gesture felt like a vow. The ash smelled oddly like old filters. In the morning, there was a new line in the ledger penned in the margins: "Don't forget the ones you didn't mean to." The city's rituals hardened and softened in turns. People started leaving small offerings with lost items, notes that read, "We're trying." Volunteers hosted midnight watches to speak names into recorders. That practice calmed the vents for a while. The ledger kept growing but also healing. Names were returned, phone calls answered, a photograph reunited with a sister. I learned to be careful with my own handwriting. I wrote my name once and the vents hummed my initials for nights until we read them aloud together with others and the sound eased. I keep a thin envelope in my wallet with a single line. Thank you. No signature. Maybe a commuter left it. Maybe the city wrote back. We never fixed the ledger entirely. The ducts are quieter after the city replaced a stretch of HVAC. But they're not mute. On some nights, if you stand where the stairwell meets the platform and close your eyes, you'll hear a practice syllable rub against the pipes, like someone rehearsing a name until it is safe to say. We learned to be gentler with lost things, saying names like a promise rather than an admission. After Amir disappeared, the ledger felt like a living thing. People stopped treating it as mere paperwork. Volunteers signed up to sit the night shifts and read names into recorders. We invented a ritual. Say a name 3 times, add a short description, offer a memory if anyone had one. It sounded foolish. At first, like role play for clerks, but the building settled when more than one voice spoke. Kara, a volunteer who shelved umbrellas, stayed late one night and suggested we try speaking names with intention. We lit 2 lamps and opened the ledger. Blue scarf, I said, fringe knit lavender. Kara repeated it and then added, left seat 3, mornings. The air ticked like a clock and the vents responded with a faint shiver. That night, a post-it appeared on the scarf's bin. She liked the river. Small acts made the office feel less like a mausoleum and more like a clubhouse for attention. City Council funded a duct replacement after residents raised concerns about audible anomalies at public meetings. Technicians called the problem resonant frequency and replaced lengthy stretches of pipework. The new system damped the more articulate whispers, but it couldn't remove the social practice we'd started. People were now primed to listen for each other, and that had a momentum of its own. Not every outcome was neat. We had reunions that were quiet and beautiful. A veteran reclaimed a pair of gloves, a student found a lost sketchbook, a family rediscovered a photograph. Each small victory felt like a stitch pulled tight, pages of the ledger filled with found and thank you. Sometimes recovered items came with notes. We tried. Those notes were apologies and proof that someone had paid attention. We learned to be ethical about the ledger's power. We refused to write names without consent. We wouldn't treat an absence as possession. Saying a name aloud became an act of care, not an invitation for absence. The volunteers' roster grew. People wanted to help, to be part of the network that returned things and sometimes people. A woman walked in one spring clutching a faded photograph of a bridge. She told us the ledger's margins had led her to it. A notation, a time, and a crooked bus stop number matched a memory she'd almost lost. She hugged the picture into her chest and thanked us as if we'd performed a miracle. Those were the moments when the ledger felt less like a problem and more like a communal habit that restored small pieces of life. The ledger persisted even after the vents calmed. It had become a physical repository of attention. People would bring photographs and small notes with the hopes that the office could translate absent things back into lives. Volunteers would nurse the ledger like a communal scrapbook, scanning pages, recording names and voices into an archive we could share, if someone came back looking. Months later, someone slid an unmarked envelope into our Dropbox. Inside, a single line, "Keep going," and a coffee-stained receipt. I taped it to the ledger's inside cover. It felt like permission. We kept reading names aloud, and the city, in its clumsy way, grew kinder. If you lose something, say the name aloud and tell someone. Leave a note. The city remembers what we teach it to hold. The ledger taught me that remembering is a communal practice, imperfect, human, and sometimes enough. If you're still awake, listen closely. Another true horror begins. Story name. Midnight Legeri learned to respect the small rules the town kept after the ledger started asking for names. My name's Evan Cole. I drive a shuttle for a small airport and run overnight errands because the schedule fits the life I want. Quiet hours, little small talk, Long drives with the radio low. The town of Marrow's End sits off a stretch of two-lane that folds into farmland. At night, it becomes a set of familiar landmarks. The diner with its neon, the closed hardware store, the municipal library with one light always on. People who work nights learn to read those landmarks like faces. It began at the municipal lost and found. Sarah, the clerk, caught me when I dropped a stack of claim tickets. People have been leaving notes there, she said, lowering her voice like it was a secret. A post-it on the counter had 3 words in neat block. Say name plus detail. I laughed it off because that is what people do with oddities, and then I saw the ledger. It was an old composition book someone had repurposed into a list. Names in Arau times tiny details. Harlan W. Blue bandana, last seen 0211. Mrs. Pritchard. Kane. Hums old hymns. The handwriting varied like many hands had touched it. At first I thought it was a volunteer thing, civic caretaking to track lost items. But there was a pattern. Names read in that ledger and returned in the town's small ways. Keys found in an alley, a scarf draped back over a bench, like the town had learned to keep what people left behind. Then people started volunteering to read aloud. Just try it, Sarah told me. Say a name and add one small detail. Practice will do it good. It felt like a quaint ritual. We did it because the ledger asked and because it was something to do on slow nights. Saying a name out loud into the library's hush felt oddly ceremonial. The words hung in air like incense. After a while, I stopped thinking of the ledger as quaint. The town behaved like it had ears. Taillights blinked in patterns in the grocery lot. A mailbox spat out an old letter with a name scrawled inside. The telephone on Main Street rang, and when answered, a quiet voice would say a name and then hang up. When names were spoken without details, the town responded with missteps. Frost on a porch where it shouldn't be. A radio that cut out for precisely 23 seconds. A power flicker that lasted the length of a breath. We learned rules fast. Say the name, add a detail. Don't invent. The ledger calmed when people were careful and bristled when they weren't. At first it helped. A woman found her husband's watch in the hollow of an old fence post. Someone returned a lost badge after. A clerk recorded the badge holder's favorite coffee shop. People who'd been on the edge of losing hope came in with photos and pleaded. We read their names into the ledger. We said the details, and sometimes the town gave back small mercies. It felt like being useful in a very precise way. Then Theo didn't come home. Theo ran the bakery in town. He worked nights, and he'd learned to stop by the lost and found between prep and first batch to leave a thermos or pick up a misplaced apron. One Tuesday, I found his basket abandoned behind the church steps and a tag tied to the handle. Theo, red cap, last seen 3:17 a.m. The ledger had an entry for him that matched the tag, scrawled the night before. We looked. The sheriff checked. The cameras. The footage showed him walking down the sidewalk and then a gap, the frames where the moon should have been. When the image returned, the sidewalk was empty, and the basket sat where he'd left it. No tire tracks, no sign of a scuffle. The town tightened like a ring. People started coming in with a different tone. It wasn't simple grief. It was carefulness wrapped with an edge that tasted like fear. We followed rules harder. Volunteers read names into our small recorder, 3 repetitions each, detail precise. The ledger swelled with entries. More people began to add sticky notes in their tidy handwriting. Say name plus detail, do not invent. It read now like an instruction from an older, quieter authority. I began to notice small misalignments. A streetlight that had always stayed on flickered dark during a reading. A dog's bark would cut off mid-phrase. The ledger gave and the town surrendered things in ways that felt deliberate and almost courteous. The ledger demanded labor. Say a name in the town expected someone to follow through. Indifference turned into small troubles. Sometimes the ledger's returns were ordinary mercy. A pair of keys slid from a gutter when we read a name and the owner sobbed in relief. A lost badge turned up in a coat seam after we added the badge holder's favorite diner. Those were the nights when the ledger felt like civic work, a slow local mechanism for attention. Not all lessons were kind. A teenager who thought it funny to invent a name found his tires slashed. A clerk who miswrote a middle initial found the file cabinet jammed shut. That, more than anything, instilled precision. The town didn't punish by terror. It corrected with petty, insistent consequences that made people careful. We made systems. The library opened a midnight desk for our readings. The diner offered free coffee to volunteers Tuesday nights. We transcribed the ledger into a shared file and backed it up. People traded lists and cross-checked names. The sheriff who once dismissed odd reports started showing up with a thermos and a steady voice. "We do it right," he told me. "We don't leave blanks." One night I took the ledger home because the book weighed on me with the sense of other hands. I leafed through and found a page I'd not seen. Etta B., last seen by the river, likes daffodils. It was a neat little thing, penciled in as if it had been waiting for completion. I read it aloud in my kitchen. Etta B. likes daffodils. More, to see how the word sat in my mouth than because I expected an answer. The clock dimmed for a beat, and the street outside, which had been quiet, hummed with the small sound of someone shutting a gate. A few nights later, a woman knocked on my shuttle, pressing a daffodil into my hand. "Is this Etta's?" she asked, voice thin. The police had found a package by the river, a folded scarf and a pressed flower. Etta came home after being listed for years as left town. She cried into the woman's coat, and I felt the ledger had done what paperwork could not, asked the town to tidy itself. There were cruel returns, too. We read a name slightly wrong one November, and a run of petty failures followed. Power hiccups at the busiest diner shift, a phone line cut during a parent's call. No violence, but enough friction to remind us that the ledger wanted accuracy. Still, the practice stitched people back together. Families who'd stopped looking came with albums. Volunteers read names into recorders 3 times, voices unsteady then steadier. We left small anchors, mint tins, bus tokens, pressed flowers, because the ledger seemed to prefer sensory facts. People learned to give detail, the color of a jacket, a song hummed, a habit like always keeping a bus stub. Those facts were the ledger's vocabulary. Sometimes the ledger asked for details you didn't have. A woman came with an envelope and shook as she handed it to me. "He always kept a ticket stub," she said. "That's all I remember." I wrote what I could, and we read the name aloud into the low light. The town did something small but precise. Someone returned a bus ticket from a lost pocket at the station, folded and yellowed. The woman wept, not from miraculous answers, but from the sense that something solid had moved in response to a willingness to look. I don't know what started the ledger. Maybe someone in town decided to keep better track of absence. Maybe a dozen. Small kindnesses congealed into a habit the place picked up. I know this. The ledger asks for attention, precision, and follow-through. If someone asks you to say a name, give a detail. Don't invent. Don't ignore it. The ledger will keep practicing until someone finishes the sentence. If you ever find a composition book tucked under a counter or behind a stack of canned goods, treat it like civic property. Read aloud the names if you're asked, add a small fact, and then follow through. It's not magic. It's a discipline for a town that learned how to answer when people stopped listening. If you're still awake, you've just survived another true horror story from Sleepless Whispers. Subscribe. And stay close, and because tomorrow night, I swear to God, it gets worse.